Welcome to the Equity Institute's podcast on the purpose of public education with me, your host, Vincent Perez. Today, we'll be talking with James Miles. James is an innovative educator, connecting students with the arts and supporting art education in all aspects of learning. James has an amazing resume. His accolades are both as a performer and artist and as an educator supporting students who are up against the inequities in our system. Please welcome James Miles. Welcome, James. I'm so excited that you're joining us here for this podcast series on the purpose of public education. Could you let our audience know a little bit about you and your connection to public education?
Yes, indeed. Let's see. Well, I guess I went to school as a student. So that's my first connection. And then I guess it all stems from, I'm going to take it way back. My first interaction with school, I was dropped off and I looked at my mom and I said, "Do I live here now?" And she says, No, you're coming back home. And I said, "Oh, okay." So I just assumed that part of my life at 5 years old was just to leave home and live with 900 other kids. So for me, school's always been like a place of home. That wasn't until I really started kindergarten. I had a speech impediment. I was left-handed. I was reprimanded for both. I was put in special needs because of my speech impediment, considered less than. Then when I was put in GA, like the general classes, I was like, wait, why are we treated differently than my special ed counterparts? And that stuck with me for many, many years. And even through college, when I was a student teacher, I wanted to go to school to be an actor, which is what I did. But when I wasn't acting in college, I was a student teacher. And I remember this so clearly because this was like a linchpin in my life. I was at this school in Atlanta, and one of the teachers, this was fourth grade class, he picked up a student, 9 years old, 10 years old, and threw him against the wall and said, "You're not going to act like this in my class." And this was a black male teacher treating a young black boy like a piece of meat. And I said, that should never happen, especially within our own community in which we've always been demeaned and demoralized by educational systems. I didn't know how I was going to address that at the time, but I knew then I needed to do something in education. So when I became an actor, first I wanted to educate through my performances. Of course, as a young black actor in the 90s and early aughts, I was often cast as a drug dealer, gang member, drug user, whatever. And I turned down more roles I turned down a lot of roles than the ones I took because I was like, I'm not going to perpetuate this myth. Fast forward a couple of years, I did In the Heights with Lin-Manuel Miranda. And that was like an educational way of understanding life in Washington Heights in New York from a very multicultural perspective using hip hop music. I'd always been a hip hop educator, but this is kind of like this came together. Then with Lynn, we did the lecture company, and I was like, all right, I'm doing education and entertainment at the same time. This is what I want to do in life, and so on the set of the Michael J. Fox show, I asked Michael J. Fox, and I said, "Why are you still doing this work, man? This is 2013. And he and Wendell Pierce from The Wire were both talking about how important education was. And, Wendell's like, if I'm not acting, I want to be teaching back home in Louisiana. And Michael J. Fox is like, I got to put a face to Parkinson's to normalize it so people will see that it's real and know that it's something that needs to be addressed." And I said, "Thank you, Michael J. Fox. Thank you, Wendell Pierce." I quit and I walked off set. I finished the scene, but I walked off set and I knew I had to dedicate my life to education. I've been teaching at NYU at the time, training teachers in how to use arts in educational formats. And then I was like, I got to do this myself. So I left the set and started working as an educator for a long time, built this program using hip hop music, hip hop culture to support middle school students in learning history and English, supported them in passing their standardized exams in New York. That same curricula approach and book that I wrote is now used around the world. And that's my connection to public education. It started from my own experiences, seeing others that look like me, and intersectionally look like me, and then using my own experiences as an artist, as a multifaceted educator and creator to really shift educational practices with educators, superintendents, chief academic officers, and even school districts. So that's in a nutshell. It's kind of all over the place, but Yeah,
I
that's
appreciate it.
that's my connection. Yeah.
That's an interesting lens, especially I think about what the arts have to offer. So
Yes.
from your life experience in education, then what is the purpose of public education?
To craft a global citizen. That's it. In the most well-rounded and critical way possible. We want young people to not only know their history, to understand their history, but also to make history. So I think that's the role of education. It's not indoctrinating young people. It's about sharing something, allowing them to make their own choices and perspectives, and then saying, here's what I want to do for the good of the world, not just the good of my own pocketbook or the good of my own personal household. Education should be uplifting to the environment. It's the one part of our constitution that's not federally guaranteed. You have state constitutions that have guaranteed a right to education, but on a federal level, there's no guarantee to a right in education. And that to me is the biggest misstep of our founding fathers, in not saying like every young person needs to have an education to be better in life. It just puts you on a platform to do whatever you can, which is why, in many countries that have been colonized or run astray, they take away the arts and they take away education, the ability to educate oneself and the ability to reflect on their own lived experiences and share that with the global masses. So I think education is really just to, make a better world.
Yeah. I really appreciate the global perspective and even understanding some of like contemporarily where we are. I understand that 60% of the world is under totalitarian rule.
Yes.
And so even for us here in America to think about democracy and how to sustain a pluralistic culture. And that to me is where in your answer about public ed, I don't know other solutions or like places to get to except for a pluralistic lived experience.
Yeah. We all need that. I mean, it's why the people in the higher ups, and this is across political divides, across political lines, education is not a priority for them. It's the same old, same old. They're still using the same methods we use in the 1700s to educate young people, mostly to, have them be automaton, because it supports their capitalist adventures, or capitalist ventures. If we really want to educate people, we'll have a more equitable society. But also means that those people that are trillionaires, because we're on the brink of having trillionaires in this world, which is amazing, will no longer be trillionaires. There'll be a median outlook. Like the middle class that existed in our parents' lifetime has disappeared, right? You're either wealthy or you're poor. At the same time, you've seen declines in education. There's a correlation there. So
as you state about how we're doing education the same, I've been thinking a lot about the last 100 years. We just take a snippet and how innovations have changed our daily lives. So we come out of the Industrial Revolution, we have cars coming in the last century, but then we get airplanes. I mean, how has that changed? We get antibiotics, we get the birth control pill, we get nuclear power, we get the home computer, then the internet, smartphones, social media, now AI. But doing school the same all that time.
same way. Yeah.
So what does school need to do now to prepare our students for the next 100 years? That we don't even know what's coming. But I mean, in terms of innovation, but the problems to me are clear. Climate crisis, global migration, clean drinking water.
Simple things like Maslowian needs, right? That's what we need. To prepare young people for the future, you have to have them think critically about their present. AI is a tool, just like the computer, just like the smartphone, just like the pencil before that, just like the chalkboard before that. It's all the tool. How do we use this tool? We can't, what's happening now is like, here's how you use this device, and this is the only way you can use this device. I think back in the LAUSD when they took away all those iPads from students because students hacked the iPad, which for me as an educator is like, that's amazing. I didn't know you could do that with an iPad. That's awesome. However, the LAUSD was like, no, that's not how you use an iPad. It's like, no, you're thinking about education differently. That's the wrong way to think about education. Has to be your way or the highway. They did something new with this iPad. They broke the systems that we've created. That should generate creativity and curiosity. We want that. That's how you prepare for the next 100 years. Yeah, right.
Harness that ingenuity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what have you seen work? I'm curious, like philosophies, approaches, frameworks that you've seen really serve students in public education.
This is going to sound very progressive, but I've seen social emotional learning work very well. When we acknowledge students and how they interact with society, make them feel like a sense of belonging, break them out of the fixed mindsets that they've been culturated into, coming from whatever community that they're in. I've seen culture responsive pedagogy and practices work very well when we don't try to teach every student the same kind of way. We respond to the cultures that they come from, the cultures that they live in and experience on a daily basis. Smaller classrooms have worked well. Having teenagers start school at a later time, that's a new thing that I've seen. My own kids, when they got to high school, they're like, wait, our school day starts later? And I was like, oh, I guess it does. That didn't happen for me. We had zero period at 7 o'clock in the morning for a teenager. Our bodies aren't used to that. So that's worked well. And really centering mental wellness. There's meditation practices. There's, um, yoga happening in schools. I think that's been very good. And then as much as we've fought against it as a nation, a more integrated society, right? Not just racially, I mean, across all intersections, socioeconomic, religion, gender, sex, the whole nine. When more people, more pluralistic, as you said, more people from different backgrounds come together, that's a great learning environment. Not just for what's learned academically, like, your arithmetic, reading and writing, but also just for social interaction. That's perfect. We need more of that. We need more people to say, you don't look like me. I want to know more about you. I mean, Lincoln said that, right? That's a Lincoln quote. I don't know. I don't like this man very much. I need to get to know him better. We should breathe that in every day.
So, what are the challenges, to implementing some of these approaches, and how do you see overcoming those?
I think the national perspective on education is that it's babysitting. We saw this come up to a lot during the COVID quarantine, where it wasn't like my kids aren't learning. It's my kids are at home and I'm sick of them. Right? Like it should be like, oh, how do I help my kids learn? But it was more about like babysitting. We think of educators as babysitters, and we pay them as if they're teenage babysitters instead of the professionals that they are. I think that's one obstacle that we're facing. Two is just breaking out of the rigmarole that we're always into every day of, bell rings, go to class, grab your bags, XYZ, teacher stands at the front of the class, lectures for 45 minutes, students take notes, and then go into the next class. They've cut PE from classes. They've cut arts from classes. They've cut civics from classes. They've cut cooking from classes. All these things that make a human being whole have been eradicated just for the standardized examinations. So I think that's a big barrier to our education system if we don't allow young people to be their fully selves. And then just willingness to change. I mean, if we're really going to fix education, we really have to fix education, and it's going to be a long, arduous process, but it'll be well worth it. But the biggest barrier is just like the value we put on education,
And even so, I'm serving with a superintendent whose language is really powerful to me. Says we gotta blow up the 6-period school day, and just that right. So I mean, we kind of, but then what else, right? So if not this, if I've been teaching for 20 years and like this is what I know, this is how I did it, this is how it's been done for 100, like we
right.
What kind of fosters those innovations and then experiments and opportunities for school, especially in public ed, to make these shifts, right? And then make them this more scalable. So those are the questions I'm kind of holding around experiments. What have you seen in particular? And is there a particular school or approach that you see these experiments be successful?
There's a school in Minneapolis, high school for the recording arts. And that high school is centered around art. And those students, mostly low income, mostly Black and brown students, are doing very well academically and socially. And I think that's because of the, inculcation of the arts programming. When you think of the arts, it's not just reading or writing or mathematics, it's everything in between. So I think that's number one. We need to embrace a differentiated method of learning, which is, as you said, very, very hard. I didn't have that. You didn't have that. No one had that. But those that do have it succeed very well. I think that's worked well. I've seen schools that have smaller classrooms, multiple ages, especially in the younger grades, like the Montessori and the Waldorf kind of method of learning. That has worked really well. Going outside, you look at Finland, Norway, those Norwegian countries where they spend, even in the colder months, they spend time outside. There's something there in our brains that appreciates being outdoors, and we need that. A 25-minute recess period every day is not enough outdoor time for a kid, not in the least, right? We've all been in the classroom where you see kids like wiggling and like, great, go run around, get some of the energy out, because when you're doing that, you're also engaging with other people. You're not just at your desk. My kids spend all their time at the desk in front of a computer in the classroom. They might as well be at home learning. There's very little social interactions except between periods. Why? Let's use this time together to do something together. So I think when that happens, I've seen it in schools, mostly in classrooms, less in schools or school districts. But when I see it in classrooms, I find it working extremely well.
So if there were particular calls to action that you could offer and visions that you see, you've named a bunch of approaches. Is there anything that you would invite educators especially, or just really anyone listening to this to consider?
This is going to be hard to hear for some people because it's going to be taken out of context. But I think hip hop. You need hip hop in schools. And I don't mean playing rap music all day, right? I mean the culture of hip hop. And I'll break it down like this. Hip hop has 5 elements: emceeing, DJing, graffiti, breaking, knowledge of self, right? So emceeing, how are young people using their voice? How is a teacher using their voice in the classroom? Do they have a voice in the classroom? That's number one. Breakdancing, how are young people using their bodies in schools? As we talked about this, go outside, play, experiment, fall down, get back up, learn how your body moves through space, learn sex education. All these things are important for the entire human of the human growth. Graffiti. Now, I'm not asking young people to go write in the walls or in trains. I'm saying express yourselves visually, not just the students, but the teachers. How do you express yourself visually? DJing, the first DJ, cool DJ Herc, Clive Campbell, mixed 2 records together to make a new sound. What can you find from something outside of the schools and bring it into the schools that's new, inventive, and make something new? What can the students do as we talk about like invention and, experimentation and preparing for the future? How are you saying like, all right, let's mix it up today. Let's mix it up. Let's try something new. And then lastly, it's knowledge of self. Who are you? What is your place in this world? How are you showing up? What is your identity? What are other people's identities? How do you have that sense of belonging within yourself? How do you feel confident and pride, regardless of what the test scores tell you? How do you navigate your own self in this world and feel valued as a human being? That's it. You need hip hop in the schools. And if you have those 5 elements, you'll also translate to a really well-rounded student and a well-rounded teacher to that.
What's interesting to me about that is I listen to a lot of NPR. It's just, it's kind of, my kids call me a nerd and all those things, but but it's fascinating as I think of just what I've heard over the last few months in the car. A hip hop artist in Israel who's rapping in Hebrew and Arabic and really thinking about, the Israeli-Palestinian divide and coming together in language and writing songs so that you have to understand the other language to get the whole. And there's just something about that. So, and I hear hip hop coming out in just a global, right? This is a global phenomenon now. It's a way of being. I was here, I live in Olympia, Tumwater, stopped at a convenience store that had turned from a 7-Eleven to a kind of a family owned. And I walk in and there's Indian music, but it's hip hop, right? It's fusion. And then I hear somebody rapping as I'm with the clerk. And my son's, bopping around to the song. So this is fascinating to me. The idea that hip hop took a globe, right? gave folks voices in many languages,
Yep.
in their home languages and their mother tongues, but in this style
Yes. Right.
of expression.
Yes. Yeah. It's the sounds of the oppressed, right? And everyone has experienced some kind of oppression in some kind of way. This is not an oppression Olympics, like who's more oppressed. It's like people have always felt some kind of way, like I feel different. Even if you're part of the default category, particularly the United States or anywhere else, you're like, I don't feel like I fit. That's hip hop, right? Hip hop is not just the music; it's the culture. It's the it's the words we read, the way we dress, how we talk to one another, how we communicate. The DAP. Let's start with the DAP, right? The DAP was popularized in the Vietnam War, right? And DAP stood for dignity and pride. It's how many of the black soldiers respected one another. They dapped each other up, dignity and pride. That blew up with hip hop culture. And so now wherever you go, if someone says what's up, no matter what language you speak, and you give them a dap, they understand what's up. Who would have thought that came from this small subculture of the Bronx and New York City in the late 60s and early 70s? Like no one would have thought about that. But now it's everywhere. You go to Japan and say put your hands in the air like you don't care, and they do. like they understand it. So yeah, we see it in the commercials. We see, everyone talking about some facet of hip hop, whether it's Brene Brown or Biden, even the Boogaloo Boys, right? The right wing group got their name from Breaking Two, Electric Boogaloo. Like these racists got their name from a hip hop movie of the 1980s. Come on, hip hop's everywhere.
I love that movie.
Great movie.
He's dancing with the broom.
Yep. Turbo and Ozone. Yeah.
You're taking me way back.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm curious. You started in the beginning, in the front end of this, naming a little bit about it, but
Yeah.
I kind of like this final question of how did schooling impact you, like your own schooling experience, and in particular, like your spirit. Like, so when I think about education, so I'm asking folks, what does public ed do for your spirit, to your spirit, with your spirit?
Right.
So if you could speak a little more about your own public education.
Yeah. I mean, after kindergarten and I was in first grade and my speech impediment lessened. I still had a pretty bad stutter. I didn't like to talk very much. School was not hard, but it wasn't exactly easy. I had friends. It was cool. I learned from my teachers. It was in fourth grade that something really hit. Fourth grade, I had an assignment in class and I said, Miss Barth, can I write about comic books? And she says, that has nothing to do with what we're studying, but if you can tie it in together, go ahead. So her giving me the chance to use my own culture, which was at that time comic books, and express myself, connecting it to the history classes that she was teaching was rejuvenating as a student. And so when I did that assignment, I put my whole into it. I learned what we were studying in class and tried to connect it to the comic books. I had the impetus because it was something that interested me. And of course, that class I did very well in. So if not for Miss Barth saying like, go ahead, do something new, try it out, I don't know how successful I would have been. And then I was thinking of my little brother, who's a comedian, and same teacher said, go ahead, we'll tell some jokes in class. And he did. And now, he's a professional comedian. That kind of seeing the students for who they are, accepting them and saying, shine, wherever that means for you, shine, is fantastic. In fifth grade, I had my first Black teacher, Mr. Pickett, and he was a math teacher, and I began a love for math because of Mr. Pickett, became an accountant later in life because of my math class in fifth grade. So that was because of the public education system in Chicago that I was a part of. And then, progressing forward, when I saw we had school field trips, which sometimes have been cut in recent years. The field trip to the theater, to the Goodman Theater in Chicago, and seeing Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, with a Black man playing Shylock and a Chinese American playing Jessica, his daughter. I saw myself and my friends reflected on stage in ways that I'd never seen before. And I said, this is the power of not just education, but experiences within the educational system that launched me and gave me a lot of confidence to move forward as a person. Even before I became an educator, when I was an accountant, when I was a garbage man, when I was an actor, it was all because of that foundation of people seeing me for who I was and accepting me for who I was and allowing me to thrive. And it goes without, I forgot to mention, and I should never forget to mention Miss Ballman, who in 7th and 8th grade, she's like, James, you're funny. And, you know, as I said, I was a pretty quiet guy. She's like, you're funny. You should be funny. And I said, you know, Miss Ballman, you know, I don't want to. She's like, I'm going to challenge you to perform in front of your class, your peers, but you can pick a character. How about you do Steve Urkel? And I said, okay. So sure enough, I got on stage in front of the class. I got on stage and said, did I do that? Just like Steve Urkel. And everyone responded. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this. And it was interesting because my speech impediment lessened, my stutter disappeared as soon as it became another character. And I was like, thank you, Miss Ballman. I thank her up to this day. You know, every day someone asks me about how I got into the arts. It's like, one, theater, seeing, you know, Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, and two, Miss Ballman saying like, go ahead, be an actor, try something, do something new. And I was like, thank you. Right. She was breaking that mold. So that was the power of my life. Yeah. Of education in my life. Yeah.
You know, I think about archetypes a lot. To me, that's and how I see. I get to work with hundreds of students in the various programs I serve in. But when I see something in a student, I'm always going to say it. And this is what I tell a teacher.
Yeah.
It is that I think there's a healer in you. I notice your friends are always coming to you. You're an open ear. Oh, I think there's a builder in you. I see you're just always tinkering with these things. You know, engineer.
Yeah.
There's clearly a leader in you. You have charisma. People are following you. And so when teachers tap into those natural capacities of students, so some saw an entertainer in you, right?
Yes, right.
An artist in you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. When that happens, you see a young person's eyes light up, you know? I remember when I was teaching, I had a student that was, you know, a dancer, and as I always do in class, I try to bring arts into class. And she's like, can I dance to this? You know, we're studying like the Enlightenment period. She's like, can I dance to the Enlightenment? And I was like, sure. She went on to have a career as a dancer, right? Through ups and downs in her life, she became a dancer. Not just, I won't say that's all on me, but because I saw that in her, I was like, great, bring that. Here's some after school programming that's free. Come take this after school programming to become a dancer. Work with me. And she did. And we're still connected on LinkedIn. You know, she's a professional now, but it's like, look at that. From 17 to 30, I've seen such a growth in this young person because of seeing them for who they are. I love it, man. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the joys in teaching is actually seeing especially when students don't always believe it themselves too. Like their inclinations, but they deny it or they've been told, and then they explore it and actually affirm it.
Yes. Right. Yeah. That's it, man. That's it.
So is
what we do.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I said that's the power of what we do.
Are there, you know, for listeners and people interested in this, are there any calls to action that you would offer?
If you want to know more about the work that I'm doing, my book's coming out December 5th. It's called Gotta Stay Fresh by James Miles, the Fresh Professor. And that's a great call to action. There's some guidelines on how to incorporate the arts, visual arts, theater arts, performance into your classroom. Some anecdotes about my own teaching, anecdotes from my colleagues' teaching, and some how this affects the neuroscience of behavior. So this is a really intricate analysis of bringing hip hop and the arts into classrooms. So that's one call to action, very selfish, but also generative for the entire educational community. And the other is stop what you're doing and listen to the students. That's it. Just listen. Don't make judgments. Listen and try to go along with what they're suggesting, even if it goes a different way than you expect, right? You and I both know the power of positive greeting at the door, which seems like something that, you know, okay, greet your students every day, whatever. But we know that saves 10 minutes a week, 40 minutes a month, an entire week's worth of class every year by just focusing on, hey, how are you? I see you today. Great. I like them shoes, right? Those simple gestures. Simple positive gestures. That's my call to action. See students, listen to them, and value them for their lived experiences.
Well, and you mentioned earlier about, you know, going outside and really being connected with the body. That greeting at the door to me is also largely about touch, right? You know, fist bump, you know,
elbow bump, whatever.
You know, all the things, right? But just a small, quick connection. I've been doing finger to finger. So, you know, I belong here, or you belong here. I deserve to be safe here. You deserve to be safe here. I notice others. I see you. So I haven't taken those last three. I see you. You belong here. And just say, you know, with 4 or 5 people around you, And automatically, right, the energy in the room with just a
Yeah.
tiny
Just a
bit.
simple touch. Yeah. Just a simple touch. Finger to finger, hand to hand. It's so simple. It's so simple. Yeah. When I was working with students with special needs, oftentimes the only time they're touched is to be reprimanded, right? Or
Mm,
pushed or scolded. And so, we have to be careful, right? With FERPA rules and HIPAA and not touching students. But to say, hey, I walk up and put my hands like this and just be in front of a student and wait for them to put their hands above my hands.
yeah.
That simple gesture made such a simple connection that they were no longer seen. I'm judging. I'm guessing here. They weren't seen as the other. They were seen as part of, right? Part of the class, part of the group. They were accepted. They felt like a sense of belonging. That in itself is so powerful for a young person to say, like, I belong here. And she allowed me to be present as myself. I don't have to touch his hands today. I don't have to do anything today, but I just know that if it's the opportunity is there for me if I need it, right? I can always go to this person and feel comfortable with them. There's nothing more powerful than that as a educator and as a student, as a person. Like
Yeah.
we need touch in our lives, right? So yes.
So basic. All right. On the way out here, is there anything else that you kind of felt slipped through the cracks or any consideration when we think about the purpose of public education?
No, I mean, I think this is more of a lesson. It's education, but also general for our entire society is we just need to normalize being human. Like right now, we're so we're anathema. It's anathema to see someone who's different than you as a human being, as a person. We view across the aisle. If you disagree with me, you're not worthy, and that's not fair. Whether you are a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter or neither, or you love hip hop music or punk rock, it doesn't matter. You're a person. Just normalize being human in all of our je ne sais quoi. Like we're just a bunch of flesh on a pile of bones. That's what we all have in common. Let's just be together like that. So yeah,
Let's humanize.
just humanize. Yeah, just be a good person. That's all. Right.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I'm so grateful for this conversation.
Thank you, my brother. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate this.
All right.